Hey everybody, it's your boy, and today's video is going to be about a rather complicated issue, which is something that nobody has ever really managed to figure out. Nobody's ever managed to do it, and that is, can we unite the right? Now, everybody remembers Charlottesville. A rally was organised in order to unite the right, to show solidarity with all of the different parts of the so-called movement, all these different ideologies. They were going to converge on Charlottesville, they were going to protest, or at least just march, and show support for, I guess, Trump and against the left, and things like that. But did it actually unite the right? Well, obviously no. It descended into chaos because, well, the communists were waiting for them, and the Charlottesville police were happily allowing the communists to fight the crazies on the right. So yes, it didn't actually unite the right, but why didn't it unite the right? Well, first off, the right wing is, unlike the left, although the left is obviously not uniform, the right is definitely not uniform at all. There are similarities, yet there are far more differences between all these different ideologies and groups than in the left. At least in the left, there is a common end goal that unites 90% of them, discounting the left libertarians who are a different animal entirely to a lot of other left-wing ideologies. What is the common end goal that unites NRXs, that unites conservatives, that unites classical liberals, ANCAPs, libertarians? Think of all the different ideologies that are on the right. There's not a lot, although there is obviously overlap between many different ones. So for example, conservatives can have overlap with both liberals and libertarians and NRXs, but conversely, NRXs don't really have any crossover with liberals and libertarians and, dare I say, ANCAPs, although some people may disagree with me. I don't see how that could be the case considering the different philosophies that influence the different groups. And that's not to mention all the different kinds of liberalism and different kinds of conservatism and different kinds of anarchism, all of whom don't get along. Sure, some get along better than others, but by and large, they have different goals, different opinions, and there's not anything there that will really combine them together, because even though some of them will have similar goals, if not the outright the same goals, they disagree on the methods. But then you also had the Unite the Right march bringing in Nazis. Now, yes, of course, contrary to the media, they were not the majority. The majority were normal people, but the Nazis are not right-wing, and neither are the adjacent ideologies around them as well. The people in my circle we commonly call the farm right, or just the farmers, or Germans. These people are not right-wing, because economically, they're left-wing, and socially, they are left-wing. They just only care about white people. The prime example would be Richard Spencer, although he might be a Fed, but still, he is the archetypal version of that. Another type of person would be Keith Woods, who still, as far as I know, has not got a job. These people have far more in common with the progressives and with Marxists and postmodernists than they do with people like me or you in the audience. The only reason they're called right-wing is because of a very successful propaganda move by communists and Marxists and other leftists, where they managed to somehow successfully paint this left-wing socialist movement as a conservative right-wing movement. Other than that, they have literally nothing in common with any right-wing ideology. Some people might say the NRXs, but not even the NRXs have much in common with National Socialists. They just don't. And that's not counting all the more esoteric stuff like formalism, or the new branches of monarchism and things like that, the more aristocratic ideologies that have been popping up, post-right ideology. What do they have in common with not just the right wing, but even things that are pseudo-right or not actually right, like the Nazis? Nothing. Or at least very little. The right wing, as we have now discerned, is incredibly heterogeneous. So how do we go about, if not uniting it, then at least managing to push the so-called movement into a general direction, which is, well, rightwards? Because as we have seen, the left are able to do that, at least just about. How do they do it? Well, considering that I used to be a leftist, I might have some things to say about that. I was never a communist, believe it or not. I was never a Marxist. Although I did read a bit of Marxist literature, I never went fully communist. I always considered myself a traditional English socialist like Orwell, which, to be fair, they're not the same thing. He was not a Marxist, although he was a socialist. Because remember, people, not all socialists are Marxists, but all Marxists are socialists. But I had a lot of solidarity with them nonetheless, and I think a lot of people who I knew who weren't communists, who weren't Marxists, but were very much on the left, also had a lot of solidarity with these people. Even left-wingers who are mistrustful of communism, if not outright against it, will side with them against Nazis, even though they should be going after both of them. The enemy of my enemy is my friend in a lot of leftist circles, I believe, so they're willing, for the most part, to forego all these rivalries and opposition towards each other to push for a general goal. Now, of course, infighting does happen there, we know this, and well, look what's happened. They've had their long march, and by and large, they've had a lot of success. How does the right wing even begin to do that? Because, as I said before, we don't only disagree on minutiae and other things like that, but on the means, and not just the ends. It seems to me that there's nothing there that we can grasp and think, this is what we should aim for, because everybody's aiming for something different. And that's by and large because the right, for the most part, is based largely on the individual. And as such, the people who make up these individualistic ideologies are heavily individualistic. There are, of course, collectivist ideologies on the right, but none of them, I would say, are 100% collectivist, because that's going full on left wing, in my opinion. At most, you could say they are 75%, but they still have an important role for the individual. Now, another thing is that on the left, the predominant ideology, regardless of how many people actually subscribe to this ideology, because there are many who don't even know that they are, is Marxists. They are the predominant ideology. As such, they are the ones who have the power and the ability to force an entire movement of disparate ideologies towards one goal. Again, like I said, most of it because the left-wing libertarians are almost their own different beast entirely compared to them. What is the predominant ideology on the right? It's conservatism, really, in most countries. But what is conservatism? As I've said before, in many videos and on many tweets, conservatism isn't actually a thing. It's something that is nebulous and changes constantly every year, every decade, every century. It's completely different. One generation has a completely different idea of what a conservative is to another one. Conservatives nowadays would be considered leftists 100 years ago, and that is the truth. So I can't really say that conservatism is the dominant ideology then, because it doesn't really exist. There is no dominant ideology on the right. Should there be one? That's up for debate, and maybe that's why there's so much infighting and why nobody trusts each other and why nobody can, if not compromise, at least get along and say, well, at the very least, we'll push for liberty. Yeah, sure, some of us may want a state, others may not want a state. Some may want more traditional society, some may not care, or some may not want a traditional society. By and large, if they don't disagree with the means, they'll disagree with minutiae. But which group should be the predominant ideology? Should it be the classical liberals? Should it be the so-called conservatives who don't really exist? Should it be the NRXs? Should it be the ANCAPs? Or any other kind of anarchist group that are right-wing? I don't know. Obviously, everybody has their own biases. I would rather it be the libertarians, if not the classical liberals. Others would want a more conservative thing, or a more traditional thing, or a more neo-reactionary thing. And that's the problem. There's no one group that's pushing us towards the end goal, which, as far as I'm aware, is liberty. But they're not. If that can be achieved, if it can ever be achieved, much like how Marxism predominantly controls the left-wing movements, even if they're not necessarily in accordance with each other or even like each other, then something like that has to happen on the right, potentially, but it's never happened before, so I can't see how it will happen now. That doesn't mean it will never happen, just maybe not in our lifetimes. So if the right wing across the globe can't be united in this way, would it be best to be more localised on the nation-state level and maybe do it that way and see which ideology wins out and then hopefully defeats the left in these countries? So, for example, in America at the moment, Trump's ideology is the predominant right-wing ideology. The neocons / neoliberals are on the decline, the rhinos, those types of people, and the Trumpists are on the up. But when you think about it, they're not actually that right-wing. Trump is essentially a 90s / 80s Democrat, and apparently that's now right-wing. But you know what? It's better than the alternative. In Europe, it's much harder to say which right-wing movements are on the ascendancy in all their different countries, because Italy has had several different right-wing governments. You've had Salvini, and you've also had his neocon adversaries. He was also in a coalition government with the left-wing reactionaries or left-wing anti-establishment party. I mean, that was on the advice of Steve Bannon, which is quite interesting, but again, it's a bit up in the air in Europe. In Britain, we've not had our fight yet. We don't know which right-wing group in the Conservatives will take over after Boris and co leave, because their time will come. Will it be the high Tories? Will it be the Libertarians? Will it be something else entirely different? I don't know. Whoever wins, it will be because the public by and large may like what they propose, and also this group also happens to win the power struggles within their various organisations and our society, and are just able to sell themselves better to the mass man. So in conclusion, can the right wing be united? In theory, yes. In practice, not at the moment. It would take one group being more predominant than the other, in my opinion, in order to steer this incredibly diverse, incredibly individualistic movement into one goal, into one direction. And it may end up actually harming the right wing because of its individualistic tendencies. It would turn it into something, possibly, it might do the opposite, into a more collectivist ideology as a result of trying to push it into one direction. Maybe it would be best if a more local approach is done and all these different movements, ultimately it just relies on these movements being the best and using the right tactics in order to win. And I do believe that if all these groups win in their respective countries, I don't think they'll start fighting each other in wars or anything like that. I mean, we have progressive countries all over Europe and they don't fight each other anymore. I mean, they used to. Yes, I did call the Nazis and communists progressives. So I think I'll leave it there. What do you think? Is it possible or not possible? I'll see you all later, guys.